It's time for the CyberSecurity News Byte with Jim Guckin.
CyberSecurity News Byte, episode number 38, for December 12th, 2012. Sequoia discloses a data breach. Health Department warns of royal ransomware. Hackers earn $989,750 for 63 zero-day exploits. Cisco discloses high-priority IP phone zero-day. Hi everyone, welcome to CyberSecurity News Byte. I am Jim Guckin. And I think the first thing we need to talk about here is a data breach. And I know we talk a lot about data breaches as, you know, they're pretty common at this point. You know, you're going to be a victim of one. I'm not going to mince words. It's going to happen. I assume that I'm going to be a victim of one. I know on many other occasions I've had other things wrapped up in data breaches. You know, so, you know, I don't hold anything thinking that my information is not available out there on the dark web. The difference with this one, it's a company called Sequoia, who is a professional employer organization, often known as a PEO. And what they are and where they're popular right now with startup companies. People who don't have the time to invest, the time to invest in, you know, a HR, or especially when you're starting a company up, the way you have to put your HR, your benefits, your payroll, all that stuff is a lot to, you know, get started up with a company. So rather than some of these startups worrying about that to begin with, they hire this professional organization, which is like an outsourced human resources department. They do payroll, they do HR stuff, benefits management, you know, all the stuff that your typical HR department may do, so that you don't have to worry about that in your startup business. And as I said, you know, there's about 500 venture-backed companies right now who are utilizing Sequoia as their makeshift HR department. And honestly, it's the way everything else goes. You know, in technology for a long time, we've had managed service providers or managed security service providers. You know, these are the way to kind of save money without having to have your own internal IT department build up all the way, or even build it all, depending on the company. So this is exactly what the same thing is, but this is for HR. Now, when you have a vendor like this and there is a data breach, that can be a little more tricky. Now, I will say right now that there has been no use of this data seen out there in the wild. But I still think it's important to talk about, you know, what we need to be thinking about, because you can't opt out of these programs. You can't opt out of giving your personal information. If you want the job, you're pretty much giving your data over to Sequoia. So in early December, they sent out an email to all affected companies and individual people, saying pretty much that they detected some unauthorized access to their cloud storage repository. Impacted people who were part of the Sequoia One service, and it has some of their personal and sensitive data there. So some of the stuff that might have been accessed is names, addresses, date of birth, gender, marital status, employment status, social security numbers, work email address, wage data related to benefits, ID cards, COVID tests results, and vaccine cards that are out there. You know, all kind of typical stuff that you would hand over to your, you know, your internal HR department, because that's what they are. Now, from what we do know is that the incident happened between September 22nd and October 6th of this year. They said that the malicious party only had read-only access, which, hey, I mean, that's better than they had access to be able to change things. Now, one of the good things is as soon as Sequoia found this out, I'm sure they have a great incident response plan. They did everything they could do to contain it, and then they pretty much worked with Dell SecureWorks to do a forensic review of what happened. And this is just so that they have a third party that comes in and says, hey, here's what really happened, and here's what they did. So now Dell SecureWorks did not see any data exfil attempts. They did not find any compromised computers or servers, and they did not see evidence of ongoing unauthorized access to the company's systems. So, without having a full picture here, it sounds like the malicious party just kind of poked around and didn't do much. Maybe they were in the planning phases and didn't get around to actually executing something a little more intense. But it brings me back to the point of when you outsource, your business things to other companies, you think that you're shifting the risk, and you kind of are. Risk management says, look, you're shifting some of the responsibility to that vendor. But when that vendor has a breach, in this scenario, that information can easily include your own employees. And I'm sure if you work for one of those companies that do use Sequoia 1, your first reaction is kind of like, well, why did we choose this? Was there the proper security audits done on this company to verify? And I'm not saying that, anything was wrong. Even these great, security-based and mindset companies get data breaches. It happens. There's no way to avoid it. If someone's really targeting you, they can. But from what we can see from the letters they sent out, and they're not really doing public outreach at this point. They're just, focusing on the incident, and they're not answering any questions from journalists. We don't know what happened, how this user even got access, and why they may not have exfilled it directly. Did they, copy some things down? Were they looking for something? Was there one particular person they were targeting? Investigations like this, as I said, the incident, you'll never get all the information out of, what happened. Companies are not going to sit there and spill the beans. Though I kind of wish they did, because it would give us all a chance to learn. But I understand, look, you want to keep a rep up. You want to keep this as low as possible. You don't want this to get too many things. It just sucks because, HR is a trusted department in almost every business. And while you want to save money and you don't want to invest in creating a good HR department, when you shift the risk out, your employees are relying upon you to make a right decision. And in this case, they probably did for a while. And is that Sequoia, from what I can read so far, I have no qualms with the way they handled this. I think they did it great from what I can see. But your employees are still hurt in this. And they still got the letter, and they still get the 2 years of service. I mean, I don't know what I want to add to this. Other than, just be careful on who you trust and what measures they have in place. Maybe, make sure that they have an incident response plan that is, relies on third-party auditing. I love when a company has a breach, and then all of a sudden you find out they've gone to a third-party provider to examine their systems, and it gives you that real clear idea that they really care about getting to the bottom of this. And whether it's for reputation or not, that's a whole different story. But they cared to bring someone else in to find where the flaws in their systems may be and why they won't share it with us, the public. I'm sure Dell SecureWorks has talked to Sequoia, and they're making the proper changes for this. Once again, also the people, they gave them 3 years of credit monitoring, which is great. I mean, though credit monitoring can only do so much for you. And it's a standard thing. Everyone gives it out when there's a data breach. But the problem is, and this is not any individual business. It's just something you have to think about. If my social security number and all my information is leaked from a company that I have given it to for employment reasons, and it's out there, yeah, you give me 3 years, it's great, I watch it, but that information is permanently out there. Someone has it in a database, whether it's actively there or not. It goes in the list and they try to sell it. My information's out there. So after 3 years, my information's still the same, but your protections stop. And I don't know what the solution is. I really don't. I don't think this is a business solution, by the way, unless you don't need to collect this information. Obviously, they're an HR organization. They need to collect this. But if you don't need to collect information from the consumer, don't. Or segment it off so that during breaches you don't have all of it in the same databases. Because it's we treat our social security numbers like secrets, but honestly on the dark web, there are no secrets here. For our second story, this really applies to those in the health sector, my friends out there in the health sector. The health sector's Cybersecurity Coordination Center, also known as HC3, which, if you're not familiar, is part of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, on Thursday issued a warning for healthcare organizations about ongoing attacks from a group called Royal Ransomware. So this group was originally spotted back in January of 22, so this year, beginning of this year. And since September, they've been seen to kind of rapidly increase their malicious activities. Now, they've gone by a couple different names, and we've kind of seen them grow over the years. And now they're starting to call themselves Royal Ransomware Gang. But right now they're behind multiple active attacks against U.S. healthcare organizations. And, it said the group is growing. And right now it's a singular group. There's no affiliates to this group. But what is interesting is they're made up of other threat actors who have worked for other groups. So, you bust your chops in one of the other, ransomware gangs, and then you work your way over to, this group. Now, back in January, they were using other encrypting software from other gangs like Black Cat. But as they matured, as they grew over this, 9 months, they designed their own, which was first called Xeon, which generated, it was compared to Conti, which is the ransomware that blankets part of our ransomware talks anymore. Now, in mid-September, as the gang started to increase the way it was working, they've changed their name. They don't use Xeon anymore. They use Royal. And their new encryptor tool out there that generates ransom notes with the name Royal. So they pretty much rebranded themselves as the Royal Ransomware Gang. So they are now targeting, U.S. healthcare, which we've talked about, that just the downside to that. You're not hurting the company itself. I mean, yes, you are to a degree, because you're using their data and you're going to try to extort money from them. But if they do or don't pay, you're going to release patient records. And this is affecting people who are just your average, Joe Schmo on the street. And, out of all the levels of ransomware and all the attacks you can do, I tend to find healthcare as the lowest form. Only because you're impacting people who have nothing to do with it. And you can say that about any ransomware, and I agree with you. But, for some people, there is nothing more of a internal secret more than their healthcare information, whether they are, and we talked about this last one, whether they are struggling with addictions, or they have things going on in their mind, whatever it is, that's information that should not be shared. If you're just encrypting it and that's it, and that's the way you're going to take it on the company, I'll take it. But if you release patient records, I hate that. I really do, because as I said, you're impacting people not. Now, if you work in the healthcare thing, there are certain things to look forward. The group uses social engineering kind of attacks, which is the hope to, they trick their victims into installing remote access software. Most of this is around phishing attacks, where they impersonate software or food delivery services and say, hey, I need you to download this. And we know how that kind of attack goes. They install the software, they get in. When they encrypt your systems, they are looking for payments between $250,000 and $2 million, I guess, depending on the size of your data and what they find in it. And what's worse here is not only are they encrypting you and they're trying to talk you directly into paying them, or they'll release the data, your usual extortion tactics. And once again, we're talking about patient information here. They also use what has been described as hacked Twitter accounts. And they tweet the information on the fact that your company was compromised to journalists. And this kind of does a two-way. One, it gets the attack actually covered by news outlets. And that whole goal is to put additional pressure on the healthcare organization that had the data breach. they have your data. You may want to try to keep, and most companies want to try to keep it on, as little information as possible publicly. But when you have journalists knocking at your door, not necessarily the best way of keeping it quiet. So now there's questions, and now, hey, is my information caught up in this? It really puts the pressure on to, for an organization to make that choice of whether they're going to pay or not pay. And then if they don't pay, what's the ramification of that? What can you do to protect it? And then it's everything you do is publicly in the news. So why I'm not a fan of this is why I want to cover it, because if, any of my listeners here are in the healthcare field, why there's not a specific IOCs yet that you can protect against. Just be on the lookout for this kind of stuff. Make sure that your users are aware of this. User knowledge is the best way of defending your organization. And it's something, that it has to be done in a balance. You can't over alert them. You can't under alert them. But you got to find that balance. And any hope is to not install information or not to put this remote access tool on there so that, you kind of keep free from this, because you don't want to be caught up in this. And as I said, they are maturing very quickly, so their tactics may even over the next month or two change. So it's best to be kind of on your toes. Now, jokingly too much on this show, I often talk about bad hackers. So for once, I want to talk about good hackers. And, we tend to think that, people are just out to hack to break things. Well, there are these great undiscovered, not widely known to most of the technology community, events that challenge security experts, hacking groups to, have a competition, find zero-day vulnerabilities, find ways of breaking the products, awarding them for doing it, and, being able to fix some of this stuff before a malicious hacker finds it. Now, if you're not familiar, there's generally white hats and black hats is kind of the overarching terms. The black hats are the cyber criminals, the ones who are hacking for, nefarious reasons. And white hat hackers are the ones I'm going to talk about today, that attended a event in Toronto called Pwn2Own. And this took place over the weekend from December 6th to December 8th. And it's kind of a hacking competition. And what they do is they have a bunch of different devices. For this one, they had mobile phones, home automation hubs, printers, wireless routers, network attached storage, smart speakers, and all these are fully updated. They have all the current patches on them, and they're used in the default configuration, which you probably think is what most of your home things would have in it right now anyway. If you bought a new, let's say Google, what's it called? New Google Nest Hub Mini, whatever it's called. And you use that, and the first thing it does is usually update. Almost every IoT device looks for an update, grabs it first, and then applies it, and that's where it stands. So that's what it is. It's a fully updated, but yet still default configuration. And the companies who are part of this, who give their devices in to be hacked, are like Canon, HP, Microtek, Netgear, Sonos, TP-Link, Lexmark, Synology, Ubiquiti, Western Digital, HP. So these are very big names. And this is not the only event, I should say, that goes on. I've seen ones around healthcare where it's just healthcare things. So, over this, this little event from the 6th to the 8th, competitors won a little less than $1 million. And I should say, when it comes to this stuff, you may go that, well, that's a lot of money, but it's split between a bunch of different groups, and it pays better if you're selling the stuff on the dark web. So I like to highlight when, good people are doing this for a good cause. So as I said, there was about the competitors earned about $989,750 total. They found 63 zero-day exploits. There were 66 entries. It says 63 of them were 0 days. There were 36 teams, and there were 14 plus countries who were represented here, whether they were in groups or not. Now, I was a little disappointed to find out, at least according to the articles, I found that there were no teams that signed up for the iPhone 13 or the Google Pixel 6. But it seems like the popular one, at least from all the articles I could see, is the Galaxy S22. Now, the phone was hacked about 4 times. Star Labs team was the first to exploit a 0-day, and they used some kind of improper input validation attack on their third attempt to get into the phone before they got it. That particular 0-day earned them $50,000 and 5 Master of Pwn points. And also a group called Security Researchers with Interrupted Labs and Pen Test Limited, on their second and third days, were able to demo a 0-day that got into the phone within 55 seconds, which is an incredibly short period of time. And the great thing about this is, one, maybe some hackers knew about it. Maybe it's an exploit that nation states are using. But the good thing is that right now that Samsung has this information from this event, from one event, and there's many that go on across the country and across the world monthly. And now they have this, they can fix it, and that's a great thing. That's not to say they'll take care of all 0 days, but it goes to show you that, we talk about all the scary stuff and all these hackers that find it, or security experts who are finding ways that, attackers are doing it. But on the other side, there are also people who try to break the things so that they can protect them in advance. And, some of this research maybe can go to find out, was this used? Did someone find out before this group? But I said the main thing, and the thing we need to focus on right here, is that this group, I think, easily earned the million, these 63 0 days and 36 teams. These 36 teams earned the little less than $1 million for this, because that keeps our products more safe. And I think, if you had to ask any of the companies who were involved or the devices that they had lent, I think they would say that the prize money is well better paid at this point than post an exploit. And then they have to do damage control and stuff like that. It's easier to catch the stuff up front, and I wish more companies are willing to put the stuff on the line and continue to do stuff like this, because IoT devices and other products that we use, printers, your home wireless router, these things should constantly be tested and make sure that we have the best protection we can of them. So, I just want to say these teams, congratulations. The top teams who won, racked in most of the money. Congratulations, and please keep up this work, because people like me who are on the defense side of this, I love to see this, because it's just, as I said, easier for us to know what's out there and use that and be protected ahead of time than finding out afterwards. For our final story this week, it's something that, it calls to me, because one of the first complex networking things I did was work with a voice over IP phone system. And I know they are way more complex now than they were back then. But I thought this was kind of interesting, because it's a high severity bug in Cisco phones. There's no patch right now, but there might be a workaround depending on how adventurous you want to be. So on Thursday, the Product Security Incident Response Team, the PCERT, pretty much announced there was a high severity 0-day vulnerability in its latest generation of its IP phone systems. And what it does is it exposes them to remote code execution and denial of service attacks. And we've kind of talked about, this happening on other phone systems. And it's something people tend not to think about monitoring, which if you are in security and you have a voice over IP phone system, I highly recommend that you take time to, make sure you're monitoring that phone system so that you can detect stuff like this. So what's scary about this, and we always talk about this, is, when there is a flaw found, is there a proof of concept? And there is a proof of concept for this code, and this vulnerability has been discussed publicly. So Cisco had to pretty much come out and say, look, we're aware of this, but we don't have a fix yet. Now, the PCERT has not detected or have been alerted to any attempts to exploit this. But as I said, proof of concept code is out there, meaning it's only a matter of time before someone tries to. And it's scary because we got into a scenario here where, the PCERT says, hey, look, we're aware of this. There is a proof of concept code out there. People are talking about it. Yeah, malicious actors maybe. But we don't have a patch to give you right now. And that should tell you kind of how serious it is. So Cisco, while they're working diligently to fix this coding, they don't have the fix yet. And it's not like an easy thing to lower your risk. But they felt it was necessary to let us all know before they got it. So they're saying right now the patch will be available next month in January of 2023. But there might be a way to mitigate it. So if you want to know more about it, it's tracked as a CVE 2022-2968. It's caused by insufficient input validation, meaning it's not really checking the information that it's got. It pretty much because it receives Cisco discovery protocol packets which are unauthenticated. It gives attackers that are already in your network, so it's not something that's easily exploitable on the outside, a chance to exploit this and trigger like a stack overflow, which allows them to run code, or they can kind of use it as a denial of service attack. So if you have a Cisco IP phones running the 78,000 or 88,000 series firmware, version 14.2 and earlier, as I said, there's no patch for this yet, so there's not a particular version you can upgrade to that gets you out of this. You are impacted by this. So, as I said, there's no really workaround right now. There's no way of doing it, but there is some mitigation advice that Cisco is saying, hey, this kind of is what you might want to do, but it may cause problems depending on how your system is set up. So please test and please make sure that you go through all your due diligence before trying this. And if you absolutely want to make sure that you are mitigated against this kind of attack and you have the ability to test, what they say you can do, and as I will stress this as well as them, make sure you test it before you roll this out, because it's not a trivial change. It requires a lot of due diligence on your behalf to make sure this is fixed, or that it doesn't cause any problems or any further problems. What you have to do is disable the Cisco Discovery Protocol on the affected IP phones, the 78,000 series and the 88,000 series, as long as those devices also support Link Layer Discovery Protocol, LLDP. And that's how it'll discover its neighbors around it. So if you have those series phones, 78,000, 88,000, and they support Link Layer Discovery Protocol, LLDP, then you may be able to just disable the Cisco Discovery Protocol and work on that link layer protocol. Now, once again, this may cause problems on the network, so it's something you want to test before you make the change, and it's something you really want to protect yourself against, because you can make this change and make your phone system worse or break it yourself. So, this is one of those ones where, it's interesting where the vendor comes out and says, hey, look, here's a serious problem. We're aware of it, but we're not going to have a patch till next month. Meaning, probably this is not a simple solution for them to fix. And, they have to test out and make sure it works in their environment before they roll it out to enterprises, because they're the same as you. They don't want to break things. So, if you have one of these IP phone systems, at minimum, monitor your network to see if you see any traffic that might be causing, issues in the phone, or remote code execution, or even, a denial of service attack. If you are inclined and a little, less risk averse, then this is probably something you might have a workaround. For the rest of us, probably better off waiting until the patch comes out, really. But it just goes to show you how quick cybersecurity matters, because this is something they found. They had to announce it before there's a patch, and there are malicious actors who already probably have access to a proof of concept code. So it's only a matter of time before you take that proof of concept code and make it automated and be able to do stuff, with a click of a button on a web interface, like all those malware as a service providers we've been seeing a lot recently. Thank you everyone for listening to the show. Don't forget you can find more information on our website, cybersecurity.newsbyte.com, which will have all the show notes and links to where we got them. Everyone stay safe. Have a happy holiday, regardless which one you celebrate, and stay safe online.
You've been listening to the Cybersecurity News Byte with Jim Guckin. Learn more about our show at cybersecurity.newsbyte.com.